Welcome back to Lissa's Lizards. I have a really exciting project that I've been working on for about the last 2 to 3 weeks or so. It takes some time to put these together, but I thought it'd be really cool to do a step-by-step how-to video for how to create your own DIY naturalistic terrarium background. So these are really easy to put together using supplies that you can pick up from your local reptile show or your local hardware store. It's something that I love doing for my animals, and it really just makes my room and their homes look so much better. So one is going to be an 18 by 18 by 24, and then there's also a 12 by 12 by 18 that I currently don't have an animal to put in, but hopefully I will soon. This video is going to show both of those being built step by step with all the instructions you need to be able to build your own.
Here's a quick list of everything you'll need to get started. An empty enclosure, cork bark rounds and flats, potting plants, great stuff, gaps and cracks insulating foam, a razor blade, 100% silicone sealant and caulking gun, Eco Earth coconut fiber, sphagnum and sheet moss, and gloves. The first thing you need to do is to clean out your enclosure using rubbing alcohol or just with soap and water, just to make sure there's no residue there. The next thing I did after I cleaned everything out was to coat some of the sides with some of the black silicone. This helps ensure that you can't see some of the foam sealant from the sides. It just helps it make it look a lot better and not being able to see that. So after you get that completed, the next step is to take some of your cork bark and to kind of situate it and see how you want it to look. So this is going to help decide how it's going to look once it's completed, and just getting an overall idea for that before you actually start laying down the background permanently is really good, especially because the wood is going to need to dry with the foam sealant as the background. That's really important, so it's always helpful to just kind of lay these out and see how they look. The next step is to take the foam sealant and do as I'm doing here, and you just kind of outline everything, and you take it all and you just put a thin layer. And you have to remember here that all of this is going to expand. Insulating foam expands and becomes really big, so you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to make it huge, but at the same time it is okay if you do a little too much, because you are going to be carving away some of this once it's dry with a razor blade. So you'll kind of reshape this and readjust as you go. So it's really easy to make mistakes here, but they're all easily fixable. There's really no wrong way to do this, so don't get too worried here. The main thing is just to put a layer so that you can have a good base to start. I always leave the last couple inches along the bottom open, because that's where you're going to put the dirt or the substrate once it's all complete. So that should just remain clear so that you have that layer there and no background competing with it. The next step is to take your cork bark, as you've kind of already planned this out in your head. I have sketched mine out. That's something I like to do creatively. But once you have this foam kind of starting to slowly dry, you can kind of take all of your cork bark and start setting it up here so that you can leave it there to dry, so that it'll all harden and just really solidify with the cork bark in the place that you want it. Now, sometimes you may have to prop something up in order for it to stay in a certain way that you want. You can do this by tying some fishing line to the cage door or something like that. For this here, I used another piece of cork bark, and I kind of propped it up so that you'll see that. Another thing I did here was include a planting pot. This is something that I decided that I wanted just kind of in that top left-hand section of the bigger cage, just so that I could plant some pot some plants that would hang over and kind of just cascade down. I probably plan on using a pothos plant or some kind of ivy there, so that it'll all hang down really well. Now, the next thing that I'm doing here is taking some more of the great stuff, gaps and cracks, and just kind of filling in some of the spots that I may have missed, either under the cork bark or just little areas, because you don't want to include, places where bugs can get into, your feeder insects and things like that. So you just want to make sure it's really full. It's definitely best to overdo it with the foam than to underdo it with the foam. You can always take some away with the razor blades and carve that away. The stuff is really sticky. I just make sure not to touch it because it is not good on your hands. It will stay there forever. So I'd probably recommend using gloves. I've done this a few times, so I just made sure not to touch any of it, but you should probably use gloves if it's your first time. The next steps here are to take your silicone and place it into the caulking gun and basically get all that started. So you basically take all of the silicone and just put as much of it as possible all over that foam. So this is after, like I said, I had scraped away some of that insulated foam because you kind of want that rough surface of the foam after it's been scraped away. So definitely use a razor blade and carve it out the way you want it. Make sure that insulated foam isn't super slick feeling because the silicone won't adhere to it as well. So after you do that, you just take the silicone, coat it everywhere like I'm doing here. I chose not to use gloves. Like I said, it gets really messy, but I like to be able to do it with my hands and just kind of get all in there as much as I can. But gloves are probably great. It definitely is not easy to get off of your hands. I probably had silicone on my hands for a solid week after this. So gloves are a good thing. But you coat all this, you make sure that everything, every little inch, every little crevice is coated. This is just really important to make sure that your animal, whatever you have in here, can't really get into the foam very well. So you just want to make sure it's covered and it's completely coated. So we'll skip ahead to where that's completely covered. I think you can get the idea here. So once the silicone's completely coating all of the foam sealant, the next thing you need to do is you need to take your Eco Earth cocoa fiber, that's coconut fiber, and make sure that it's all, mixed up with some sphagnum moss. That's the way I like to do it, just because it gives it a little more texture. But you basically dump all of that on top of the silicone sealant. So you have to make sure that while you're doing this, the silicone is definitely not dry yet. You just have to make sure and completely cover all the wet silicone with the cocoa fiber. So when you do that, I also take some additional sphagnum moss here and I just put it in little areas that, I think it would be really good to collect there. And I just kind of make sure that there are little corners that just have a lot of sphagnum moss and sheet moss. It just really adds for a lot of humidity, which is really great for the kind of animals that I usually keep. Humidity is really important, so sphagnum moss is always really great to have in there. So I just put it in some of the inner parts of the cork bark so that it kind of sticks in there. And then next I took some of that sheet moss and I just found little areas that I thought that would live nicely. I really like the sheet moss just because it gives it a pop of green color in your enclosure. It just makes it look a little bit more alive. And of course, once I add the plants and everything, it'll definitely look even more alive. But for this, the sheet moss just serves a good purpose. And again, it'll definitely help with humidity, and that's really important.
So there you have it. There is your how-to guide to make your own DIY naturalistic terrarium background. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, go ahead and leave a comment and tell me, about any plans you may have or something that you've done in regards to DIY terrarium enclosures. So if you make any of them, feel free to tag me on Instagram or, just send them my way. I'd love to see them. I always love looking at different types of enclosures and different things that people do to get ideas and, to inspire me to do my own. I know people do some really cool creative things with their terrariums, so I would love to see yours. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.